Hello, my name is Ken Etchells, a trainee counsellor and emerging researcher, completing my Integrative Counselling Masters at Leeds Beckett University. I'm an Army veteran, a former engineer, and after becoming disabled, I changed careers and moved into counselling. Today I'm sharing what student counsellors' imposter experiences reveal about training, supervision, and the emotional labour of becoming a therapist. This comes from my dissertation and from my listening closely to trainees with lived experience, something I can relate to as an insider researcher. It made the work feel like a passion rather than an academic task. What I found is that imposter feelings aren't a personal flaw, they're a part of the process of becoming a therapist. In this study, I'm using the term imposter feelings to describe the experiences trainees talked about. But it's important to briefly acknowledge where these ideas come from in the literature. Traditionally, the term imposter syndrome comes from the early psychological work of Plants and Eames in 1978. They described it as a non-genuine feeling of intellectual phoniness that persists even when there is clear evidence of competence. Researchers further expanded this, defining it as a fear of being exposed as a fraud because of difficulty accepting personal achievements. This framing focuses on the individual, on self-doubt, minimizing accomplishments, fear of failure, and the tendency to overwork to compensate. But, in my research, in the counselling training, more broadly, the term imposter phenomenon is a better fit. In my abstract, I describe it as relational, contextual, and often rooted in long-standing personal histories shaped by internalized narratives, training structures, and belonging uncertainty. Participants didn't describe a clinical syndrome, they described identity processes. They talked about feelings like I feel like an alien, about lifelong messages of not being good enough, and about how training environments can either amplify or soften those narratives. So, although the terms are often used interchangeably in general use, in this study I refer to these experiences simply as imposter feelings. That language reflects what trainees describe: a dynamic, context-dependent emotional experience that emerges at the intersection of internal narratives and external demands. Understanding imposter experiences matters because they shape how trainees themselves see themselves, how safe they feel, and how they develop as therapists. These experiences highlight the emotional labor of becoming a therapist, holding your own vulnerability while holding clients' emotions. They also help us to support identity formation, reduce shame, and strengthen supervision and reflective practice. And importantly, they show how belonging uncertainty shows up in training environments. Many trainees enter counselling through what we might recognise as wounded healer pathway, being the emotional rock for others and seeking understanding after their own difficult experiences. That history makes imposter feelings even more powerful during training. The aim of this research was to explore how imposter experiences shape the development of student counsellors. And the central question was, what do student counsellors' imposter feelings reveal about the process of becoming a therapist? I use a qualitative phenomenological approach with a constructivist epistemology to understand trainees lived experience in their own words. Participants responded to adverts within the university where I utilised a persuasive hook that attracts those who identify with imposter feelings. Have you felt not good enough or feared being found out during your training? 7 postgraduate trainees took part in the voluntary participation from postgraduate, certificate to master's level, all in placement and all from diverse backgrounds. Despite this diversity, they shared common theme of vulnerability, belonging uncertainty, and identity formation. This diversity of pathways into counselling included trauma histories, emotional responsibilities, and identity struggles, shaped how trainees experience imposter feelings. The first theme was internalized narrative. Participants described long-standing stories of not being good enough, shaped by early academic wounds, family messages, perfectionisms. These narratives didn't begin in training, but training amplified them. People talked about being called lazy, being told they'd never be good enough, or feeling different from their family and peers. One said, "It's like a me in my head," whilst another said, "I felt like an alien, like I didn't belong anywhere." These narratives often came with emotional dysregulation, spiraling, rumination, overwhelm. Imposter feelings were fundamentally about identity and belonging, not competence. This aligns with research showing imposter feelings are rooted in identity, threat, and perfectionist self-monitoring. The training environment shaped imposter experiences through assessment, pressure, theoretical language, peer comparison, and supervision dynamics. One trainee said, "The language sometimes feels too big for me." Another said, "Supervision can make me feel exposed." Whilst another, "It depends on what's going on. It's not static." Imposter feelings were context dependent, rising and falling with relational safety. Supervision could contain these feelings or intensify them. Academic culture often reinforced bold internal narratives of inadequacy. Adequacy. Training either amplified imposter feelings or contained them, and the difference came down to relational safety. Imposter feelings intensified in the therapeutic space. Trainees worried about causing harm, getting it wrong, or being exposed in their developing competence. One said, "I worry I'll do harm without realizing it." Whilst another said they feared being caught out, and that was ongoing. Another asked, "How can I help someone when I'm a mess myself?" These fears reflected ethical sensitivities, not incompetence. Trainees were deeply aware of the responsibilities they hold, and the awareness created emotional tension. The emotional cost of becoming a therapist is significant. Holding your own vulnerability while holding clients' emotional worlds. Despite the intensity of these feelings, trainees didn't stay stuck. They coped through supervision, peer support, reflective practice, reframing, and emotional regulation. One said, "Supervision helped me reframe it." Another said, "Talking to peers helped me realize I'm not alone." Whilst a third said, "Sometimes the imposter feeling pushes me to reflect more." Imposter feelings became part of professional identity formation, a catalyst for reflection and resilience. With the right support, imposter feelings can be nurtured into something constructive. They're not always negative. It can reflect ethical sensitivity, a deep awareness of responsibility. These feelings often begin long before training, but training environments can either reinforce or soften them. Relational safety is central to transforming imposter feelings. Trainees are developing a dynamic balance, the ability to sit with uncertainty, reflect, and still move forward. This emergent model brings together everything trainees described. It shows how external influences, training expectations, supervision, academic culture, peer comparison interact with internal narratives of self-doubt, belonging, uncertainty, and identity. When these forces meet, trainees experience developmental tension. That feeling of pressure, vulnerability, and emotional strain, that tension activates a reflective adaptation where trainees make sense of their experiences, reframe fears, and integrate learning. Over time, this leads to professional growth and an emerging sense of identity. One participant said, "It's not one thing, it's everything happening at once." Imposter feelings aren't a flaw. They're part of a development process activated by the demands of training. There are three key implications. First, training programs need to address imposter feelings explicitly. These experiences aren't just personal struggles. They're shaped by culture, language, and relational dynamics. Naming them reduces shame and normalizes vulnerability. Second, supervision has a central role. Supervisors need to validate and normalize imposter feelings, rather than treat them as incompetence. The supervisor relationship can contain these feelings or intensify them. Third, both placement and academic environments must foster belonging. Imposter feelings were fundamentally about identity and belonging, uncertainty, not ability. Relationally safe environments help trainees regulate the narratives they bring with them. And finally, imposter feelings can contribute development, bringing part of the reflective practice, ethical sensitivity, and identity formation. To conclude, imposter feelings are common and complex. They offer insight into the emotional labor of becoming a therapist. Supporting trainees requires systematic and relational approaches. One participant said, "I'm learning to sit with not knowing, and that's where I grow." That captures the heart of this work. Imposter feelings are not a deficit, but part of the developmental journey. Thank you. And if you would like to contact me, you can reach out by my email address and my LinkedIn link that is on this final slide with the references.